Hey Dana, thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. This is such a thrill to be able to talk to you today.
I love the title of your podcast. Like, I mean, it's just that's like my sweet spot is the overwhelm. Like that's that's where I come in on all this. So I get it. I love that.
Yeah, you have been really instrumental in my journey. I have been doing this podcast for over 2 years. Probably over 50% of them, I go, The Container Concept by Dana K. White. Because
Yay.
it's like so instrumental in
Yeah.
everything, And so we're gonna not focus a ton on the practicality of the decluttering because you have so many resources and so many books on that. But everyone read Dana K. I feel like I have to say your name like Dana K. White is like a full thing. Read
Right.
Dana's other books. They're amazing. They're so helpful, just so down to earth, practical. So I'll make sure to link to all of them in the show notes. But yeah, you have been just such an inspiration to me in my journey, and everyone that's listening is like, "Oh yeah, that's the person Emily talks about all the time." Okay, great.
Hey, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love it if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about you and your family, how you serve women, and then like maybe one thing you like to do for fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I um am a mom of three. My kids are all young adults. As of tomorrow, when we're recording, I will finally be an empty nester. I'm not saying that like I'm excited. I'm a little sad, but also excited because the next stage is always fun. Um, but it's funny because my videos this year, I record all my videos in the summer. And so I was talking about how I was about to be an empty nester in a week, whatever. And my younger two moved out to go to college, and then my oldest was like, "Hey, I'm going to move back home." Like I had 2 days. We had one naked breakfast. I'm
Oh
sorry, is
my
that
gosh.
inappropriate?
No, it's fine.
No, but I mean, it was like, yeah, like all the like, oh, we're empty. Oh, okay, never mind. We're not empty nesters. But I think that I'm in a stage of life where I have to be open, and I'm glad I like roller coasters, and like, you know what? It's fun. It's actually really, really fun. So that's my stage of life. I teach people how to declutter. I teach people how to overcome overwhelm,
Mhm.
like how to get their house under control. And I do that from the perspective of someone to whom this stuff does not come naturally. So my
Mhm.
story is that I was completely overwhelmed in my home. I didn't know why it was so hard for me when it seemed like it was easy for everybody else in the whole entire world, like everybody else. Um, and I started writing about that anonymously just as a way to learn about blogging because I wanted to be a writer. And I thought I was going to do it temporarily. And instead, this is the thing that I write
Yeah.
about. Like, I did not know. And part of that is just um, the reality that there are so many people out there who are where I was, and they need to know that they're not alone and that there is actually hope. Like there
Yeah.
is a way forward for those of us who get completely confused and overwhelmed and feel left out. Like what do other people bored knowing that I'm not when they uh you know read traditional organizing advice or
Hmm.
whatever. So which is usually written by organized people, which
Yeah.
is great, right? But their brains don't work the way that my brain works. Um and that's what I had to realize. So did that answer your question? Because I feel
Yeah.
like I'm blathering.
No, you are not at all. And I will, I've always been very organized. Like when we had indoor recess, I would clean other kids' desks out for fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And
So
I
it's
was a
a,
kid who was like, "Can you do mine?
can you do my
Can you do
desk?
mine? Can you come do mine?"
And
Yeah.
so just even recently, because I've had so many moms, and I'm sure you have a lot of moms in your community that are like, oh, I've just been diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. Like this is just like coming more to the forefront. And then for me to notice, oh, lots of people's brains when it comes to organizing, they don't work like my brain works, and just trying to figure that out. And what I love about your approach is that you are normalizing all of these things that sometimes people have felt shame about, that like they're not good enough, that what's wrong with me? Why doesn't my brain work, the way that it should? Why can't I just get my house under control? Like, what is the issue? And it's been such down to earth practical advice from like the you are not alone type of
Yeah.
thing. And I'm curious though, because you've kind of had all the more the practical books. And this book that you just wrote, it is more rooted in your faith and looking more at like the stories that we're telling ourselves about why we're not a good enough homemaker or why we're not the Proverbs 31 woman or whatever. And it's coming more from this place of like what we have been told maybe as women about what we should be and like what our homes should look like, but from that
Right.
faith perspective. So I'm just curious, like what, after writing all of these books more about like the practical side of thing, what compelled you that this was the season, like this was the time to kind of shift to more of this focus?
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing is that my faith is the defining thing for me as a person, right? And
Mhm.
I've always been very open about my faith, but I've always kept the practical separate from that. And that wasn't because I was scared to mix in the faith. It was actually because I was convicted to not mix in the faith.
Mhm.
And for somebody who's not a Christian, like when you hear convicted, you're like, wait, what? You know, I've had people go, what do you mean by conviction? Isn't that like, you go to jail, whatever. But like, what I mean is like God laid it on my heart, do not make this a spiritual issue because I had assumed it was a spiritual issue, right?
Mhm.
And the confusion that would happen for me because my house was not a wreck for lack of trying.
Mhm.
It was not out of laziness. Okay. And so this confusion of what people assume is the reason that your house is messy. Oh, they just don't care. I cared. They just don't put the effort in. I put the effort in. Right. Like, so it was not for lack of that. And so this confusion that would happen. And then when layered on maybe what I had heard that I think people had good intentions, but I was hearing um, encouragement, spiritual encouragement through my filter of shame. And also that encouragement was not actually helpful.
Mhm.
So things like, well, your house is a reflection of your relationship with Jesus, or it's a reflection of your faith. And I was like, okay, well, that makes no sense.
Mhm.
And also, so I am following Jesus. I am becoming closer to him. My faith is, strong, but if my house is a reflection of that, then oh my goodness, like it makes it look like I have zero faith, right? Like, and so that disconnect was so frustrating to me and layered on this spiritual shame
Mhm.
onto my house issue. And as I started working on my house and also growing in my faith at the same time, because the year before I started working on my house, I started a very in-depth Bible study. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I had been a Christian, I had been a believer, I had been a missionary, like I mean, I was like very much into my faith, but everything changed when I really started reading daily for myself and going, oh, I had always heard this story and taken it, one way. And then I read it for myself and I'm like, oh, I was not actually understanding, what that was. So reading it for myself just changed everything, right? So at the same time that I was working on my house, I was also growing in my faith. And God just kept showing me, Dana, I am not horrified by your house, right? Like I understand that you are working on it. I understand it is not a reflection of your faith in me, right? And so he was like, I don't care about your messy house, I care about your heart.
Mhm.
Okay. And that shame being released is actually a big thing that allowed me to finally make progress because the shame is not motivating, right?
Right.
So if you tell me that my house is a reflection of my faith and my house is a wreck and I have tried and can't figure it out, and I've prayed and I've read the Bible and none of that affected my house, then I feel like, okay, now not only do I feel like a failure in my home, I also have a spiritual failure. And adding that on just makes it so difficult. So removing that shame was incredibly powerful for me in being able to actually make progress because part of it was also understanding, oh, I'm not broken.
Yeah.
Like my brain working the way that it works is not a mistake. God actually designed my brain to work the way it works because we're not all supposed to be the same. And that's beautiful, right? Like the world needs people with brains like mine, and so
Yeah.
accepting that I was designed and not defective was not an excuse to say, oh, well, my house, oh, well, this is the way I am, like whatever, which is people's fear, right? Is that if you tell if you tell somebody that Jesus doesn't care about their messy house, well, doesn't that mean that they're just gonna like live in filth? And I'm like, those of us with messy houses don't like it. Okay. I know that you don't see that, but we're trying.
Yeah.
We may have tried and given up, but like it's not an issue of, oh no, if I let them know that it's okay, Jesus loves them anyway, then they're just going to stay that way. It's like, no, no, no. That freedom from that shame is the thing that let me move forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That was a lot of talking. I'm
Nope.
sorry.
Good. It was good. One second.
Show up.
Oh no.
What?
Hold on a second. I'll take all of this out. I don't even know what that is. Okay, so what happens is, dear listener, I get so excited that I hit the microphone. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I hit the microphone because I like flap my hands around and then the computer goes crazy. So my
Oh,
apologies. I will go ahead and cut all of that out. So my
you're
apologies.
fine.
Because I'm like, wow, Dana, that was great. Hit the mic and everything goes crazy. So anyway, thank you. I love the fact that you're, kind of turning this idea of like the connection between the morality of a clean home. Because for so long, my mom, love you if you're listening, Mom. She's like the Martha Stewart of everything, and everything was meticulous all the time. And part of my growth as just like a mom and a homemaker and a Christian woman, honestly, is just recognizing that like I don't have to have this unrealistic standard of perfection in my home to be a worthy
Yes.
mom, to be a worthy wife, to be a worthy homemaker. And yet we have been told this, the cleanliness is next to godliness. And then, the Proverbs 31 woman getting up so early and doing all the things. And then we sometimes will compare ourselves to that standard and be like, well, there's no way that I could, ever measure up to that. So, how do we just kind of recognize, or how have you been able to recognize that, like, those, I don't know where it comes from, if it's like a combination of Christian slash puritanical values or something, but we're kind of, at least in the United States, we have this culture around us telling that. How do we start seeing the taking care of our home as this, like, what I've heard called morally neutral activity, that it is not
Yeah.
connected to our spiritual, it's not connected to our salvation, it's not connected
No.
to our spiritual growth. So how did that shift happen for you when you're able to recognize that?
Well, I think it's facing it head on.
Hmm.
Because you have the phrase cleanliness is next to godliness, which is not in the Bible, right? But people think that the idea is true,
Yeah.
right? And they will often use the Proverbs 31 woman as like if you Google is cleanliness next to godliness in the Bible, right? The answer that all the blurbs say is no, but.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of those blurbs, like, so this is before you even click through to, see whoever's decided to write about that on Google, right? Um, before you even click through, most of them will say no, but, and will have some mention of the Proverbs 31 women. Okay. Now, therefore, a lot of us are scared to read Proverbs 31.
Hmm.
When your house looks like that and you're already feeling like, this is a spiritual, what is going on? I've got some kind of spiritual failure. It's like, I'm scared to read that book. So in my book, I go through all of Proverbs 31 and we just go through every single verse. And do you know what's not in Proverbs 31? Any mention or allusion to, no at all, any reference to the state of her home, whether
Hmm.
it's messy or neat or organized or decluttered or any of that, right? But it's very clear that she's not lazy and
Yeah.
she's a hard worker,
Hmm.
right? And we have this assumption, we being society in general, okay, not me. Like I'm here to be the one to say, absolutely not. Like, no, I'm here to break this delusion of everybody,
Yeah.
right? Is that laziness is the reason that your house is messy,
Hmm.
right? And so the assumption is, well, she's not lazy, so obviously her house is perfect. No, it doesn't say
Right.
anything about her house. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. She did have servants. We know that, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, that is the core issue here, right? Is that by saying that she's an example of a clean house, we are saying a messy house is the result of laziness. So we
Yeah.
have to tackle that right on. I mean, head on, right?
Hmm.
And so that like let's just go straight into that. And here's the other thing too. The people whose homes are highly cluttered actually, because I've met so many over the years, right? Because they send me their full life stories. They remind me so much of the Proverbs 31 women, right? She's taking care of everyone.
Hmm.
She's making sure she has what she needs. She is, I mean, like, she's the person that you call on to organize the entire, okay, we've got to feed 350 people because they've been evacuated from an area and blah, blah. The person you call, not always, but I'm going to tell you, a lot of those are the exact same women who are in tears over the state of their own home,
Mm.
right? Because they are highly competent, intelligent women. And so that was such a disconnect for me in my own home was I was like, I know I'm not stupid, but my house makes me feel stupid. Right. And so therefore it was such a source of shame, such a source of shame for me because I was like, I can do things. Like I'm a competent person. Like
Yeah.
I can figure things out and I can't figure out this thing is the thing that is unconquerable to me. So I just think it's the way that we get over that is to dive in and not be afraid to actually read it. And then like cleanliness is next to godliness is a dangerous phrase
Hmm.
because it makes it feel like if I could just get this cleanliness thing down, I'd be good,
Yeah.
right? I'd be closer to God. And in reality, that means if that's what I'm trying to do and that's what I think is going to get me closer to God, I don't understand God and I don't understand who He is or what He's looking for me because nothing gets me closer to God. He is the one who has provided the only way through Jesus'
Yeah.
righteousness, right? Like that's it. That's the only thing that will get me to God is Jesus. And thinking anything I can do is the thing
Hmm.
getting me closer to God means I don't understand. And that right there is such a hard thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the letting go at the same time as it's all of that. And so I think my main point is it has to be a conversation,
Hmm.
right? Little quick phrases that you mean to be encouraging make you feel like, okay, well, I helped because I said, well, God is a God of order. Okay, I'm out. And like, okay, well, I really helped her because I told her that. That is not helpful.
No.
That is not a helpful phrase, besides the fact that that's out of context.
Yeah.
um but like one of the things in the book that I talk about is that I got really excited about as I was I thought I thought I'd read the whole Bible and I probably had read the vast majority of it, but I made myself read from beginning to end
Hmm.
because there's some wackadoodle stuff in the Bible. I mean, like legit wackadoodle stuff. But also, just to be clear, in case somebody's not a Christian, like it's the Bible's not like a how-to book. It
Right.
is a story, right? And so it's a story of sin that makes you go, "What?" But so anyway, yeah, that's the story about Jesus. And
Hmm.
anyway, blah blah blah. So what was I talking about? I'm
You
sorry.
were
You
talking
mentioned
about.
ADHD a minute ago. Which I have not been diagnosed by anyone official, just by people on the internet. That's it.
Yeah. I think you're
Uh,
just mentioning, you were talking about reading the Bible from beginning to end and just,
oh, the
yeah,
cleanliness. Yeah. So
yeah.
the cleanliness is next to godliness. Um, I knew I knew the kind of the speech Jesus had given when he like really gave it to the religious leaders for being hypocrites, right?
Hmm.
Like that was I remembered that speech. I didn't remember what triggered that speech. What triggered that speech the first time that he gave it is the fact that they were criticizing his disciples for not washing their hands
Oh,
before they
right.
eat. So cleanliness was the actual issue. So then cleanliness is next to godliness is this phrase that gets thrown around like crazy, trying to be inspirational, but it's not helpful. And then this is the actual issue. And Jesus never said, don't wash your hands. Like that wasn't at all what he was saying.
Hmm.
What he was saying is, don't turn it into a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
Like if you turn it into a spiritual issue, you are confusing people. You are causing problems, spiritual confusion by turning this issue that, of course, it's a good thing, but it's not a spiritual issue into
Hmm.
a spiritual issue. So
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
such
like
a
I'm
good
very
point.
preachy today. I'm sorry. Sometimes my mom will listen to things. She's like, wow, they just let you just go on and on. So please stop me.
No, it's great. We're all
Yeah.
about, yeah, like you said, like conviction, like being
Yeah.
convicted about something. It's
Yeah.
good. You were mentioning before, like not the confusion, but where people assume wrongly that people that don't have their house together, they don't care,
Right.
when really they truly care. And the accepting of who we are and how God has wired us is something that is important for everyone. Also, because I have always struggled with performance and striving,
Mm-hmm.
so that the striving is what gets me the gold stars, and the striving is what gets me the love. And to have a relationship with Jesus where the striving is not part of the equation is kind of like confusing because none of our human relationships work that way, right?
Right.
So I've had to kind of accept my wiring more from the gold star performance standpoint. But I'm just curious, like when you were able to kind of accept your wiring and how you've been uniquely wired by God, and sort of the you're is talking about experiencing like the miracle of that. How would you recommend somebody, besides kind of recognizing some of these false things and false teachings that we have been taught are lies and we don't need to believe them, to be able to start accepting our unique wiring and how we have been designed, like you said, that we're not
Yeah.
defective, that we're designed. How's that happen for you?
Yeah. So when I started my practice blog that did not intend to teach this.
Hmm.
This was not going to be my life's work. Like my mom still laughs about it. She says sometimes she's like, I kind of think about it every single day and giggle a little bit that you teach people how, and she says it kindly, like she's the most supportive ever
Hmm.
of anything I do. Um, but when I started, like I said, I was anonymous in the beginning, so I was completely honest, right? And I also had the title A Slob Comes Clean, which I feel like God gave me that idea. It's very catchy, but I didn't want to call myself a slob because I had often said it's not like I'm a slob. I like things clean. I do work on my house all day. It's not like I lay on the couch doing nothing. So I would often defend that. But because I had used that horrible word, which I never encourage anybody else to use, right? Like I'm not saying let's all call ourselves slobs. I'm just saying that's the word that came to me. But using that word and being anonymous
Hmm.
meant that I there was no point in trying to sugarcoat anything. There was no point in being anything other than completely and totally honest. And being completely and totally honest meant that as people, nobody I knew, but as people started reading what I was writing, they started saying, that's my brain.
Yeah.
What you're saying are the things that go through my brain that I would never speak out loud, right? But I was in this kind of bubble, this anonymous, thing. And so they were relating to what I was writing. And this was in 2009, back in the olden days of the internet, right? And so at that point, if somebody left a comment on your blog, you clicked on their name and they had like a blogger profile or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I was so excited to get anybody, actually saying me too. And I was like,
Yeah.
really? Because I thought I was the only one. So I click on their names and I started to see that the women who were relating to what I was saying were highly creative. Okay.
Mm.
So artists and poets and writers. and theater arts teachers. I was a theater arts teacher before I had kids, like lots of theater arts teachers, like just so many highly creative people. And I went, oh, okay, there is a relationship between the creative side of me that I thank God for making me creative. Like,
Mhm.
I love that. It's my favorite thing about myself. I'm very grateful that God made my brain creative, but it is directly related to this struggle. Not that
Yeah.
all creative people struggle with clutter, but the vast majority of people who struggle with clutter are highly creative, right? So it it just that honestly was the thing that helped me see,
Hmm.
oh, this is how my brain works.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the problem, is that my brain works differently from the brain of someone who is naturally organized. And
Hmm.
that is why it feels like we're speaking different languages. They
Yeah.
say something to me and I'm like, what? Like, wait, what? Like, your before picture is like my dream after picture.
Yeah.
That was what we were talking about here. And so I feel like I come in as the person who, now it took me a long time to be willing to teach anything,
Yeah.
but now I view myself as the person who is like the translator, because it's
Hmm.
not like I'm coming up with all these creative solutions or whatever. I'm just literally going, okay, here's the facts that some people, that most people who are naturally organized don't know that we're missing. This is the communication gap
Yeah.
between the naturally organized person and that's where I come in, like the container concept that
Yeah.
you mentioned. I mean, honestly, if I was not writing about my own thing and not worrying, I wasn't teaching anybody anything, I don't know that I would teach that concept, because as I wrote about it on my blog, I was like, oh, now I get it.
Hmm.
Right? Like, this is the thing I don't know that people know whose houses are under control. And it seems so obvious when you actually put it into words, that I think I might have been embarrassed to teach it to anybody, except that because I was writing about it in real time as I was figuring it out, other people said, what?
Yeah.
Like, containers are meant to contain, never ever occurred to me. And I was like, okay, it was because of the other people who were reading and, giving their
Hmm.
experiences as well, that I saw, oh, that was a crucial piece of that communication gap
Yeah.
that was going on.
Yeah, well, you've been a translator for me.
Oh,
It's
good.
been helpful just to be able to serve women and be like, oh, yeah, like I've never, I never thought about that way. And the container concept and also, the clutter threshold, like there's so many concepts where I've been like, okay, yes, like that makes sense. And um just as far as like the container concept, one of the things that you had in the book, you were kind of translating it to being able to translate to our spiritual lives. And I just want to kind of read a part of the book that I loved.
Yeah,
So, because I'm going to have a
thank
question
you.
about it. But when you write, when I make decisions about whether something is container worthy, I'm asking myself, does it deserve space in my home? In my spiritual life, the question is, does this deserve the space in my heart? Does it fit in the identity that Jesus has given me? And so, just, I guess, I love that concept because I think frequently about making room and also, that we can't receive what God has for us open-handed if we're clutching to our stuff. And just like, how, I guess, have you been able to find freedom in that, making the decisions about like, okay, is this worthy of the space? Is this
Yeah.
worthy of the space of my heart? Does this fit with what I want as far as like pursuing my life as a Christian and pursuing this relationship with Jesus? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so in the book I talk about, there's with the container concept, when people are like, okay, um, I have a really big house, and so technically everything can fit,
Hmm.
but it's still too much. I'm like, well, the reason I teach people to declutter to the container first is that it is something I don't have to make decisions about, right? Like, I don't. And so the first thing is, there are legitimate actual boundaries. And in scripture there are some legitimate actual boundaries, right? Um things that I should do, that I shouldn't do, all that. So that's the first step, is to go like, what are the actual boundaries that are given to me? And those things, there's really no negotiating, right? Like it's just the facts. But then there's also your clutter threshold, right? Like, so that's the first thing to start with, is the actual boundaries. And then you go, okay, but what can I handle? Like, what
Hmm.
can I actually do? That's my clutter threshold. That's my um yes, technically these things are not, against what's in the Bible, but
Hmm.
at the same time, I don't need to be doing that. That is too much for me. And a lot of that is that self-acceptance of, you know what? I may want to be this person, and yet it's not good for me to
Yeah.
pursue some of these things, right? So like one of the things I talk about a lot with, as I got my house under control, I had envisioned that my goal was to have a magazine worthy home. Like now we would say Pinterest worthy, right?
Hmm.
But at the time, there was no Pinterest, when I started. But that was my goal. Like this vision of, that's what I want. But as I worked toward that, as I got out the things that just flat out did not fit in my home according to the actual physical boundaries, it clarified the goal of what I was actually working toward. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Hmm.
like there was I could go ahead and do these things. I could go ahead and get the stuff out that just didn't fit. And as I got there, I went, oh, actually, I just want a home that doesn't hold me back.
Hmm.
Like I like nice decor. I have a friend, Jackie, who comes in and helps me figure out my decor. I like that, but it is not something that drives me. You know what I mean? Like I am not driven for the decor, but I am driven to be able to do the things that I want to do, to be the person that I want to be, who can, offer my home at the last second.
Yeah.
Something happens, like my daughter, um, for prom, a bunch of girls were getting ready together, and they were going to be at somebody else's house, and uh, there was a thunderstorm and their power went out. And
Mm.
so I was like, yeah, they can come to my house. They didn't end up coming to my house, but I was like, you can come to my house.
Yeah.
And those are moments where I go, I've done it. I'm different. I'm changed. Like my home is changed because I could do that. It's the, what do I want to do? So it's that first, the first thing is to go with the boundaries. Because sometimes when we just think about, I want to be that person, and then it's like, wait, how do I do that? Well, the first thing I do is just get the things out that don't need to, that just don't have space, that don't have rooms. And then that gets me toward that, where I can really work with things and go,
Yeah.
what is it that I want out of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we have this finish line, like you were talking about, like magazine worthy or Pinterest worthy. And a lot of times we say, well, I can't do such and such until I get there. Once I get organized, once I get my
Yes.
home in order, once was a, but it doesn't often happen or kind of not in the way that we think. And I think one of the things that was really enlightening for me in your book was just that a lot of times we feel like we can't approach God, we can't have this relationship with Jesus until we have it all together. Like, okay, well, why would he want to hear from me if like my life is a mess? And once I get myself cleaned up and, literally and figuratively get things cleaned up, then I can approach. And when it comes to, our prayer life and really anything, but having that relationship with Jesus that you can actually like pray, we sometimes are like, well, I can't do that because I'm not at the point where I can have a conversation because my house is a mess, my life is a mess, all of this is a mess. And do you have any words of encouragement, I guess, for someone that is feeling like that feeling in that I can't approach because I need to have my life in order and just recognizing that that's, not what God wants.
At
And just
all.
yeah, at all. And
Yeah.
like
I mean, like,
how do we
he's,
just like not listen to the voices in our head like, well, you can't do that. You can't have that relationship because things are so messy and disorganized and all those voices that are kind of like telling us that we're not worthy, I guess,
yeah,
of that relationship.
yeah. We're not worthy of that relationship.
Hmm.
I think that's what it, like even the person who you look and you think, oh, okay, well, it makes sense for them because they've got it all together. They're not worthy either.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's actually the point of our relationship with God, is that we are not worthy on our own. He places his own worthiness on us to make us holy so that we can have a relationship with him, right?
Hmm.
Like that, understanding who he is and what Jesus did to be able to accomplish that, that is actually how we come to God. And fully understanding that helps you see nothing I do or don't do can
Hmm.
keep me from God other than rejecting that gift that he's given me, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's all about what he's done. So I talk in the book about, my perception as a child when teachers would talk about, Jesus knocking on the door of your heart, and wouldn't you want to have your room clean if he
Mm.
showed up at your door? And I know that they may have said something completely different, but that's what I heard, because my room was a constant source of shame for me and frustration. And my mother tried so hard to help me, and through all the different ways, discipline and, encouragement and reward systems. And she tried it all, like every last thing. And it was a huge, um, you know, I couldn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I would hear that, and I would hear, you better get your life cleaned up before you go to Jesus. And then actually studying grace and my inability on my own to please him, and that, everything I do, whether it's good, bad, whatever, it's all like filthy rags. Like, I mean, like, it's not
Hmm.
even, it's just not. And so it's all what he's done. And so then understanding that and going, oh, that was wrong when I thought that I had to clean up for Jesus, right? And so I think that that's the main. I feel like I'm just going to compliment you, because you've done a really good job of like getting to the heart of so many of these issues, in this interview. You really have. Like, you're really good at what you do.
Oh,
So
thanks.
I just yes, it's the core of everything. That's the reason I'm have such a blunt title,
Hmm.
right? Which I know I've already started to see that a few people are like, wait,
What?
wait, are you saying that the Betsy house doesn't matter? I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. But which I feel like I've earned the right, because I've written 3 books on how to get
Yes.
your house under control, right? So like, you cannot accuse me of being like, everybody live in your mess, like that's not what I'm saying, right? But I'm also saying it because I know the person who is struggling and they don't want to live in the mess,
Yeah.
right? Like, I get this. Um, but let's keep that separate and not let it get us off track in understanding who God is and what he does want from us.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think what you said kind of at the beginning about how understanding that Jesus doesn't care about your messy house is the what lifts the shame so that you actually can live the life that we're intended to, because
Yes.
we're not designed to
Yeah.
live a life of feeling ashamed. Like that is not
Yeah.
what we're called to. So I think
Come to
that
Jesus exactly as you
yeah.
are,
Mhm.
but know that coming to Jesus is going to change you.
Yes.
Everything's going to change, but you don't change it before you go to Jesus. You
Yes.
go to Jesus how you are, so that then, that's when change happens.
Yes. And dare I say yes and amen to that one.
All right.
Oh, this is such a pleasure, Dana. I really
It's so fun.
appreciate it. And I would love it if you could tell everyone where they can get the new book, which I realized I was like, did I even say the name of the book? So the full name of the book, everyone, Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. He cares about your heart. So where can everyone get the book and also connect with you?
So you can get the book wherever books are sold. Always put in Dana K. White,
Yeah.
because there is a man that is not me, who, if you just put in Dana White, you're going to end up finding all this stuff about the ultimate fighting stuff,
And
UFC.
I always kind of wondered why you had the middle initial. Now I know.
Yep. Yep. So danawhite.com, at least it used to like redirect to the UFC. So that is not me. I have disappointed some people over the years, I'll tell you that. But so you have to put the K in there. But if you put the K in there, Dana K White, you're gonna
Mhm.
find me everywhere. So I'm on YouTube, I have a podcast. I have a slobcomesclean.com. That's the name of the blog that I started back in 2009 that started this whole thing in motion. And That's where you'll find that's my home on the internet. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I will link to everything in the show notes and thank you
Okay.
again. Really appreciate you coming on the show and the book. Yeah, I I do like the Kindle highlights and then after I was like, okay, well, I kind of highlighted the whole thing. So
Oh, that makes me so happy.
it's just really so insightful and so freeing. I know that you will be blessing so many people with this book. So thank you for writing
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.